Alright guys, this is going to be a video response to Skep's video Spooge 7, I think it was. He starts off by asking me why I made a video response to him, and that's simply because he had a few digs at me in a response to Frank that he was having an exchange with. I was part of the conversation last year, and he spent part of the video just slagging me off basically, so I thought I'd make a response to some of the things he was saying there. The first thing that Skep says in his video that I'd like to respond to is a statement that was referring to Snowden and Manning's decision to leak in the way that they did. And he says, if someone says that they're doing something illegal but for good reasons, I consider that to be an extraordinary claim that requires evidence. I would say to that, Skep, that the evidence is in the nature of the information that was revealed. So, you know, if they did this illegal thing, i.e. whistleblowing in the way that they did, yeah, but for good reasons. You can say that's an extraordinary claim. Perhaps it is, and perhaps I would say the evidence is in the nature of the information that is revealed. So that comes down to a conversation about whether you think it's important that we know these things, like the kind of dragnet surveillance that the NSA is doing, you know, the secret coercion of corporations to do things like build backdoors into encryption programs to hand over all this, the metadata and the rest of it. The taps on pipelines and all the rest of it. If you think that's important for the public to know what is being done with our tax dollars and is being allowed to happen, you know, and being done by our elected officials, our government, our representatives, you know, these are things that would affect whether or not we support them, whether or not we vote for them. So in a democracy, I think it's important to know these types of things if they're doing things that directly affect us and affect and take away rights, certainly affect our rights, and you know, so that's what the conversation becomes. And you know, do you agree that that's stuff that we should know about? Not just Snowden leaks, obviously Manning's leaks as well. You know, storing illegal cluster bombs in the UK, official orders to ignore torture, 66,000 unreported civilian deaths, and all of the rest of it. So, you know, do you think this is information that should be known by the public? Do you think it's information that would affect whether or not we can support those entities? So I think, but basically I think that is the evidence for whether they've broke this law for a good reason. But I think that statement, Skep, kind of does betray your focus during this debate. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you come across as if, you know, your priority is that the law is the first and most, you know, is the most important, and then after that, you know, we can talk about extenuating circumstances and exceptions and ethics after that. But you seem to hold, you know, the law as kind of this, as the most important thing, is almost divine in the way that you put that along. You know, they say they're doing something illegal but for good reasons. I consider that to be an extraordinary claim that requires evidence. So across the board, of course, that doesn't work, because there's many laws that, you know, are nonsensical. You know, for example, smoking marijuana, I don't think I would need to give a good reason for why I would ignore that law. And I'm not saying that you would either, of course, just saying that statement doesn't work across the board. When we're talking about some of the laws and legislation that we've been discussing in this conversation last year, more to the point last year really, not so much this year, it's moved on to the whistleblowing side of things. But when we were discussing the NDAA, of course, that's a whole set of laws and legislation that was brought in after 9/11. Obviously, AOMF that preceded the NDAA, Patriot Act as well, problematic there. But this is all legislation that was kind of brought in a time of perceived emergency after 9/11. And we know, of course, that some of the laws, legislations and decisions that were passed, you know, probably shouldn't have been. Some definitely shouldn't have been. For example, the decision to go to war in Iraq, Congress was lied to pass that, and just one example. But that whole set of laws and legislation that we're discussing, you know, was brought in on a faulty pretext, and that is the war on terror. That's a whole different video to make, but you know, there is no clear distinction. Who is the enemy? Where are the enemy? What constitutes supporting the enemy? It's all left up to interpretation, and very vague interpretation, as we've seen manipulated by the Obama trying to keep that guy in Yemen in jail for supposedly aiding the enemy when he was really just reporting on US drone strikes in Yemen, and many other examples besides. But the distinction of the enemy is is non-existent really. Al-Qaeda and affiliates, when we've been aiding Al-Qaeda affiliates in Libya and now in Syria, and probably elsewhere as well. But those dividing lines aren't as clear as some of this legislation would like to make out. So that's, in a roundabout way, I'm trying to make the case that those laws, those legislation that we've been discussing are problematic at a base level, and they're built on a house of cards, I would suggest, and that the rationale for a lot of that stuff is a load of bollocks. Which is why I've been trying to promote, a zooming out of the discussion to look at it from a wider point of view. And Pyro and Ella have been doing an awesome job on that, and I hope this video doesn't distract from the dialogue that you've been having with them. I know you've responded to Pyro already. I hope that you will be responding to Ella's 7-part video as well. That'll be brilliant. And they, like I said, just going to broaden the debate a little bit, to look at this from a more constructive point of view than just arguing over the interpretation of specific legislation that is at its core problematic in the first place, as I said, because it's based on a house of cards, the war and terror and all the rest of it. And I know that was a bit of a ramble, a bit of a ramble off to the side, but to get back onto the point that what you said, because obviously you weren't talking about the laws in respect to the NDAA on this point, when you said, if someone says they're doing something illegal but for good reasons, I consider that to be an extraordinary claim that requires evidence. You said that about the whistleblowing, and I said previously that the evidence, I would suggest, is the nature of the information released. But I think it would be helpful to turn that observation around and point it at the establishment, the entities that are being exposed with these leaks. And that is to say that they've been doing things that are illegal. Certainly some things that were previously illegal and have since been codified and made legal. We know that Congress basically created the permission for NSA to do stuff that it was already doing, and the rest of it. And so they're certainly doing things that have been illegal, can be argued are still illegal. Certainly things that are potentially damaging to citizens' rights, and just a lot of dodgy stuff. I mean, don't need to go down the list again of the things that have been revealed, but I think they need to provide that. I think it's an extraordinary claim for the government to argue that it's doing these things for good reasons, and I think that claim from the government requires evidence, and they haven't given any. They haven't given one example. For example, with the surveillance, they haven't given one case where someone's been convicted or a plot has been foiled as a result of these expanded surveillance techniques and powers. Okay, nothing that couldn't otherwise have been already surveilled in a normal way with warrants, in the traditional way of a person of interest and following their communication network through the normal procedure of warrants and criminal investigation. Nothing has been proven to have been foiled. No plot has been foiled. No conviction has been given owing to those expanded surveillance powers that didn't involve traditional surveillance techniques. So they haven't given evidence that's for a good reason. So that's, even just from an economical point of view, they haven't justified the ridiculous amount of spending on these programs. Even just from a purely economical point of view, it's not been validated at all. When they say they're doing it for our safety, they haven't proven that at all in the slightest. Of course, it's ridiculous to say that it would work, because any potential terrorist not worth his salt is not going to be, discussing the next bombing on Skype. So kind of ridiculous concept in the first place that would be their rationale for a lot of this stuff. Again, we're talking just about surveillance now, but so I think that those illegal and arguably illegal and certainly just worrying behaviours from the government in regards to all these revelations, I think it's extraordinary claims for them to. It's extraordinary claim for the government to say that they're doing it for good reasons. They haven't given those good reasons, and I think that it's. I kind of would have liked it to seen you explore that question in the opposite way, as I've just pointed out, because I think that's orders of magnitude more important. it is order of magnitudes more significant, the actions of our government, and they affect us, how they affect the world, and repercussions we've seen, than it is to talk about the repercussion of someone revealing that that's what's happening. Shooting the messenger has never been more apt. That seems to be your agenda. You want to line those messengers up, but you're not seeming to be that concerned about what they're revealing, which is a shame, because I would say the nature of what they're revealing, validates they're revealing it, and in the way that they have as well. Because I know you've talked about the difference with the Thomas Drake situation. You've talked about that with Pyro, and I think it was you. It was either you or Rob. I can't remember. One of you said that the Drake situation was different because. And again, if this wasn't you, if it was Rob, I apologise, and you may not hold to the same position, but something I wanted to pick up on that I can't quite remember where I heard it from. So he was saying that the Thomas Drake situation was different because he hadn't revealed anything classified, but that kind of is superfluous to the point that was being made with Thomas Drake, in that even though he tried to go through the proper channels, and even though he was extremely careful not to reveal anything classified, the government still tried to destroy Thomas Drake. The government still threw their full litigation weight at him. The case collapsed, thankfully. And again, that's probably down to the fact that he was so careful. But the government's intent was to destroy Thomas Drake and to send a message out not to blow the whistle on anything. And again, Thomas Drake was merely just blowing the whistle on economic frivolity, financial waste within the surveillance system. I think it was Thin Thread, a later Trailblazer, I can't remember the order. The first version of that surveillance system, the warrantless wiretapping, was massively wasteful, and he was trying to just blow the whistle on that, and also blow the whistle on the fact that privacy protections had been taken out in the new version that he was not, he couldn't support. But again, the point of bringing Drake up is to show that the government's behaviour towards a whistleblower that did try and go through the proper channels, a whistleblower that did take every caution in not releasing anything sensitive or potentially damaging or classified, they still went after him with the full force of the law. So that is proof in the pudding that going through these proper channels cannot be trusted, especially when it's something on such a scale as these things were being revealed. Okay, they're not just isolated incidents of something bad happening on the battlefield. They're not someone stealing some money out the till. This is systematic shit. The whole political system has been corrupt in many different ways, and we know this. I'm sure we'd agree on a lot of those ways. For example, corporate personhood, for one. But this is why we need to zoom out a bit on this debate, and I think you have been trying to narrow it quite a lot. And with there being so much to talk about, that's where it gets frustrating when you start talking about the characters of the people having the debate, because there's so much to say already without going down that route. It's a little bit playground, a little bit boring. But let's hope you got some more interesting things to say coming up. I'm sure it's not finished yet. Yeah, I know I'm not the greatest orator on YouTube. Pyro and Ella certainly structure their videos, I would say, better. So I don't I'm not trying to make out I'm some kind of authority or that I should have priority in the debate. But so I apologise. This is not the easiest to follow. I'm doing my best, but I got a few notes. Right. So getting back on point. The example you brought up twice of Snowden and mishandling this information was the David Miranda incident at the UK airport, and you were saying that he had on him the password to the encrypted files that held thousands and thousands of these leaked files. Okay, that's, I think, another example of you really taking government statements as gospel. That's what the UK government said. David Miranda and Glenn Greenwald have denied that that's the case, and I'll link to a video interview with Glenn Greenwald on Democracy Now, where he says that that's just not the case. It's just not true that he had this password to access all these Snowden leaks information on his thumb drive. So that's just you can believe the government or you can believe Greenwald, but it's up to you, I guess. But maybe one pertinent piece of information to do with that is the fact that from the government's own statements, they were only able to decrypt 76, I think it was, 70-something files from the thumb drive. Now, if he'd had the password on his person to all of this stuff, why couldn't they decrypt all of it? That doesn't really make much sense. There is an article I'm going to link to in the information bar that goes into great detail about analysing the government's statements around that situation and basically debunking it, making it, well, at least bringing it into question at least, and you can have a look at that if you want. But so that example you brought up twice with David Miranda is debatable to say the least. And he wasn't charged. You know, if he'd had a password to these files and if he'd had this classified stuff on him, potentially, we don't know for definite, but potentially that could have come under the Terrorism Act 2000. It says it's an offence to possess information that could be of use to terrorists. I don't know exactly how vague that is if they classify that any more specifically, but seems pretty vague to me. But if they'd have been able to, detain him, arrest him even based on that, on the Terrorism Act. Why didn't he? Why didn't he get arrested? He was detained for the maximum number of hours without actually being charged with anything. So I don't understand why he wasn't charged if he was legitimately stopped. Which, by the way, they couldn't have stopped him knowing what was on his thumb drive. So they did stop him under the Terrorism Act fallaciously because they didn't ask him about terrorism. They clearly weren't interested in whether or not he was aiding terrorists or part of a plot or anything like that. No, it was just an intimidation thing. It was all about, obviously, Snowden's files. Again, he wasn't charged at the end of it, so why not? If they had a legitimate reason to stop him and if he had this information on him. So, but that example you gave, Skep, it seems to be just taking the government's word as gospel. I think you need to be a bit more sceptical about that, and lots of things actually. You don't really seem too sceptical about quite a lot of stuff, unfortunately. Right, what else we got? I mean, to do with mishandling information or the risks involved, the risks inherent in this whole shebang. You bring up this thing about Miranda with the password on him, and that's a worry. That's reckless. I would suggest our worry would be better directed at the way that this system is managed or not, as the case may be. I mean, the capabilities that the NSA has created for itself here with this surveillance is contracted out to the private sector. Obviously, Booz Allen Hamilton, I think Stratfor as well. Similar, I don't know if they have exactly the same relation, but certainly Booz Allen Hamilton is a private sector organisation with obviously little or no oversight, obviously, since Snowden was able to take what he did and do what he did. But there's tens of thousands of workers with access to these types of system, and you don't think that could be manipulated, and then we're not getting here. I mean, Snowden's telling us about the capabilities of this system. Shouldn't you be more worried about the potential for that system to be abused? Not that we're being told that system exists, that those powers exists. I find it very strange that you seem to be more concerned with being told those powers and that capability exists than you do with the potential for it to be abused, which there's been reports to suggesting that it already has, and it is quite often, and with very little oversight, of course. So, that's a worry. But again, that's not something. I'm not saying you disagree with that. I'm sure you would say that that needs to be looked at. But I don't know. It's just your focus seems to be a bit confusing to me. I don't really get why you have the focus you do. Okay, what else we got? Yeah, we talked a lot about the intent of leakers. I shouldn't believe their rationale for having leaked. Just because they said it doesn't inherently mean it's either true or that it's inherently bollocks. You need to read what they are actually saying and decide for yourself whether you think that correlates with their actions and how they behaved, and whether or not you think that's justifiable, really, rationale. And I do. Both Manning and Snowden have released comprehensive explanations for why they've done what they've done, and and I find that to be intellectually. To have intellectual merit, that's not even the right turn of phrase, but I find them to be logically sound in their and to correlate with their actions as well. You know, they haven't. It seems to me that they haven't done this for personal gratification or anything like that. They've done it for genuine concern over the actions of our governments. But more to the point, I really couldn't give a shit about their motivations. I really couldn't give a shit about their rationale. Manning and Snowden could have both come out and said, you know, I just wanted to get on the front page of the newspapers. You know, I just, you know, I just wanted to do this because I was bored or because my boss pissed me off. They could have come out and said that. It wouldn't have made a blind bit of difference to me in the grand scheme of things, because the priority here is to look at what's being released. Is that information pertinent to the public, and whether or not we can support the officials that are letting this stuff happen or doing this stuff, these actions that gravely affect the world and people around it. So that's my focus. That's how I decide whether or not to support a leak, is what the information reveals. Sure, it would take a bit of the shine off if Manning had said, yeah, I did this because my boss pissed me off. It would take a bit of the shine off. Manning wouldn't so much be someone to revere as he has proven to be. She has proven to be. Now he's wanting to be called Chelsea, that's fine, whatever. Her statements in court, her behaviour throughout the 3 years of incarceration, and all the rest of it has been exemplary, has been respectable, has been pretty amazing, really. So the character of these people, especially Manning, I don't think is in much debate by anyone with a fair mind. But again, it doesn't mean anything to me. So, you know, you focus on the character of leakers, you focus on the character of the people you argue with in debates. It doesn't interest me at all. And I'm going to briefly touch on something because you brought up in your video, and it's been brought up before. You're trying to make out that I'm dishonest, and you gave a couple of examples. One was the way that I described a link to an article on Harvard website. And yeah, I will admit, if you just look at that screen grab and read what I put in the information bar, you could say that it looks like I'm trying to claim that this article was representative of the entire establishment. Alright, you can say that just looking at that screen grab, but the context there is that Skep's video series to me was called Spooge, Special Education Ooge, and him and others had repeatedly called me stupid and uninformed, uneducated, and that was their way of trying to brush off anything I was saying at all by just calling me an idiot, basically. So what I was trying to do there was show, look, there are people with far better credentials than I have that are making the same observations and have the same position on this particular argument, which was to do with the way the NDAA was being interpreted. So, you know, the content of that article was what I was trying to get a response to, and obviously it descended into, well, you try to make out it was representative of the whole institution, which is silly in the first place, because when does an educational institution ever do that? When do they ever have an official stance on something political like that? I don't even know if that's what happens at all, but yeah, you could make out that that's what I was trying to imply, that I was trying to be dishonest by that. But you know, again, that's interpretation, there's context there, there's lazy use of rhetoric, there's whatever, it could be other things, but you know, and there's things you've said, Skep, that I could have tried to argue that you've been dishonest with, but I don't know that they're being dishonest. You know, you could genuinely think that and just be wrong. You could be just being lazy rhetorically, or you could genuinely be trying to be manipulative, or you might not be. For example, you called Julian Assange a date rapist. He's not been convicted, let alone charged, of date rape at all. Even the women alleging who are involved in the case are not trying to charge him with date rape. Okay, they're not trying to say that it was not consensual. And there's lots and lots of problems with that court case anyway, and the allegations, and it's a whole Swiss cheese situation, which I've made other videos on. But yeah, you called Assange a date rapist. That's the bullshit. And there's other things you said in the exchanges last year that I could try and make you out to be some kind of dishonest character with the way that you presented certain things and the way that you phrased certain things. But it doesn't help with moving on the debate, and we've already talked about that shit. And if people want me to go over it again, Will I need to? I'll probably be able to just link a video that I've already addressed it in, but it's just boring shit to me, so yada yada. What else have we got here? Right, the WikiLeaks video, the collateral murder thing he was on about, that one could say that Assange was being dishonest in the way that he presented that video. Well, I don't think that that's really true, since they released the full video as well at the same time as the edited one that was for maximum political effect, which is no shady thing when you're trying to bring attention to something like this. I don't think that the key concerns from that video are altered by watching the entire video, which largely cuts out irrelevant stuff. You know, the firing on the van is still something to question, to say the least, and the rest of it. So, but yeah, they released the entire full video at the same time as the edited one, so I don't think you've really got a point with that. So that's just a minor point. I made some notes on your video, so I'm just going to go through them, I guess. I think that's it, really. Yeah, okay, I'm going to stop now because it's long enough already and there's much more to say, but hopefully it won't distract Skep from responding to Ella, whose 7-part series video he said that he would respond to, and I'm looking forward to that because she's a much better speaker than I am, as is Pyro. So hope people got something out of this. Hopefully it's not been too terrible. Bye bye.